I believe that everyone has at least one great story that only they can tell. My best story is dedicated to discovering these tales and releasing them into the wild. It's June, which means we're in the midst of Pride 2020. As such, I wanted to give a voice to members from the LGBTQ plus community. So I hope you'll join us this week as we listen to stories from that community. I'm Travis Tidmore. Join me as I discover Jonathan Slavin's best story. Jonathan, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good, Travis. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Yeah?
Tell us a little bit about your backstory.
My backstory. It feels like my character's backstory. I'm an actor in Los Angeles. I am probably right now most well known for I did a couple of seasons of Clarita Diet. I did a show called Better Off Ted. I was on Speechless. I was on a show called Dr. Ken for 2 years recently. But I've been working for 30 years in this business. So I've been on a lot of stuff. I'm super lucky to get to do what I like to do. And I'm happy to be visiting with you today in finding our way to creating something in the midst of this pandemic.
Excellent. That's exactly what this show's about is creating content and putting out hopefully stories that'll bring people smiles or hope and just stories from other people's lives that they haven't been able to experience that they can experience through the storyteller.
I love that. Hopefully I will not disappoint you today.
I'm sure you won't.
What a terrible story.
Well, with that, why don't we get into it? Jonathan, what is your best story?
My best, I don't know if it's my best story, but it's a good story and it is a true story. So I thought I would tell the story of how I became sort of the follically challenged individual that you see in front of you, because I didn't always look this way. I actually, for a lot of my life, I had these masses of really thick, dark, curly hair. And what I always say to people when they ask about when I started buzzing my head is I always say the same thing, which is, listen, it started to go and I was so not going to be that guy, so I just buzzed it all off. That is actually a total lie. And so I thought I would tell you the truth. So this is the truth of how I achieved this look. When it first started to thin, I sort of entered the 5 stages of grief, but I stayed very firmly in denial. And I would sort of optimistically like pull clumps of it forward, thinking like no one can tell that my hairline is receding if I just pull it slightly forward. And then in an effort to make it look fuller, I started dyeing it darker. I'm not sure why I thought that would work. We cling to lies in the face of adversity, and that was a lie that I was clinging to. And around the time that I started dyeing it, my husband's best friend, Kevin, was diagnosed with cancer. And this was like a big C cancer. This was something called Merkel cell carcinoma, which is a cancer you do not want to get. This was a cancer that, like, every time you go to the doctor, they say, you have something we cannot cure, because they want to remind you that you need to get your affairs in order because you will be lucky to live 3 months. It's that kind of cancer. So while Kevin was pursuing various treatments in an effort to extend his life, which was ultimately unsuccessful, we started having these Friday night dinners. And he would call it Club C for cancer, because he wanted to be a whistler in a graveyard and stay cheery. And I think it was right before one of these dinners that I had re-dyed my hair. Now, admittedly, I had left the dye on a bit longer than was recommended, and it came out quite a bit darker than I had intended. But I thought, no one will notice, and if they do, certainly they will be too polite to say anything. So off I went to see Kevin, and I walked in, and he looked at me and he went, well, hello there, Liza. So if you don't know who I'm talking about, if you're a straight guy, you might not know that I'm talking about Liza Minnelli, who's a survivor and a triple threat and a revelation, but is not somebody that I've ever really wanted to emulate in a physical way. So Kevin was not going to be polite about it. So we were about halfway through dinner and he kept staring at me. And I was like, what? And he put down his fork and he said, have you ever been blonde? Now, the answer to that question is no. I have never been blonde. I had never even thought about being blonde. I think I have olive skin. I have very Jewish features. We don't go blonde easily. We're not a people that goes blonde. So I said, no, 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 no. And he said, you know, it would make your hair look fuller because you wouldn't see such a contrast between the dark hair and the skin showing through underneath. Politeness has been abandoned at this point. And I have to admit that he was definitely speaking my language, because thicker looking hair, that was something that I could see being drawn to. But still, I said, no, you know, I'm an actor and like I'm known by some people and they expect me to look a certain way. And then he said, I promise to live another week if you let me dye your hair blonde.
What do
Like,
you even say to that?
what do you say to that? You say, okay, that's what you say to that. So I went, okay, all week. I'm panicked that I've agreed to this thing. But I thought, you know, he's on a lot of radiation. He's on a lot of painkillers. Maybe he won't even remember.
Yeah.
I trundle off to dinner. I walk into his house, and there on the counter is an array of chemicals and a dark cape and a bowl and a brush. And he says, that's for after dinner. And of course, I didn't eat. And after dinner, he put the cape around my shoulders and he sat me down and he started mixing up this paste and grabbing all these different bottles that smelled kind of like laundry. And one of them had a big 40 on it, and I didn't know what that meant. I do now, but I didn't then. And I said to him, do you know what you're doing? And he looked at me like I was an idiot and said, of course, I once dated a hairstylist. That seems legit, right? Okay. So he mixed it up and he put it on my head. And we sat and we talked and we visited. And after about 30 minutes, he went to rub some off to check. And he looked and he went, oh, it dried out. And I was like, oh, what do we do? And he was like, no problem. I have lots more. So he put more on my head. And then he was like, I have an idea to keep this from drying out. And he got out a roll of saran wrap. And he wrapped the saran wrap around my head so that the bleach wouldn't dry out. Genius. This all seems legit, right? Sorry, my pig is coming in the room. If you hear grunting, that's my pig. But so I'm sitting there with saran wrap on my hair. My head is getting kind of warm at this point. And he says, let's just hang out and talk and we'll watch a TV show. I'll distract you from the discomfort of the heat on your head. So we talked and we visited. Maybe another half an hour, 45 minutes goes by, and he pulls the plastic back and he takes a towel and he rubs a little bleach off and he was like, oh, it's yellow. I was like, it's yellow? And he goes, yeah, it's like chicken fat yellow. Like, I'm a vegan, so I definitely don't want any aspect of me being compared to chicken fat, right? So I go, what do we do? And he goes, no problem, I've got this. He takes the saran wrap off, he applies another layer of bleach, he puts the saran wrap back on, and then he goes and he gets the blow dryer. And he starts applying heat to my head, which he does for like 25 minutes. And I'm like, this is really getting uncomfortable. And I feel sort of like it's burning a little bit. And he was like, it's just part of the process. This is the price of becoming a blonde. You have to just embrace it. And you're never going to go back. So there I sat while he applied the heat to my hair. And after about 25 minutes, he pulled the plastic back and he rubbed the bleach off. And he went, oh. And I said, what? And he went, I think we should take this off. And I was like, okay, great. So I followed him to the bathroom and he took the plastic off and I bent over the sink and he washed my hair. And I was like, oh, the water's too hot. The water's too hot. And he was like, the water's actually cold. And I was like, oh, it's really sensitive. He was like, yeah, but it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And he handed me this very dark, very thick terry cloth towel. And I dried my head still leaning over the sink. And I pulled the towel away. And in the towel was what looked like clumps of the most delicate white cotton candy that you've ever seen. It was not even really hair. It looked like if you touch it, it would just disintegrate. And I was like, that's not great. But I took a deep breath and I looked up at the mirror. Now, here's something that you need to know. If you are going to chemically burn all of the hair off of your head, you have to know that it doesn't do an even job. So there were like certainly parts that were completely bald, but there were other parts that were like these weird little tufts like a baby bird has. And they ranged in color from just snow white to I had some like creamsicle orange over here. And I'm looking in the mirror at what's left of my hair and my head. And I turn and I look at Kevin. And there's this long pause. And he says, I love it. And I looked at him and I said, me too. And then I got in the car and I lost my mind. And I remember vaguely like screaming about like that I'm not going to work again, and there are no roles for baby bird actors, and like I'm just doomed, and my manager's going to kill me. Everyone's going to be so mad at me. And I got home, and my husband saw me for the first time. He wasn't at the dinner, and he thought it was the funniest thing he had ever seen in his life. And the next day, he buzzed the remainder of my hair off, which is the first time that my hair was ever this short. About a week later, I was at a large event, and Kevin actually attended. It was the last time that he was seen by a large group of people. And we sat together. And by this point, he looked very ill. He had lost most of his hair because of radiation, and he had dropped about 30 pounds. And he and I were sitting together at this dinner table, and all anyone who kept coming over was saying was, Jonathan, you buzzed your hair, because that is a much easier thing to talk about than the fact that there's somebody sitting next to me who's clearly on his way out of this world. He stayed at the event for a couple hours, which was longer than any of us thought he would, before he got tired. And I think he was feeling a little emotional because he knew it was probably the last time he was out in public. And he said, I'm going to go. And he got up to leave. His boyfriend was going to grab the car. And as he walked by me, he looked at me and he reached out his hand and he put it on my head. And he said, well, I really miss the blonde, but I love this. And I looked back at him and I said, me too. That's my story.
That's a great story. Sorry, I'm trying not to weep a little bit here.
No. I mean, it's, so it's one of my best stories.
That is a very good story.
Okay,
Thank you
good.
so much for sharing that with us.
Of course.
Well, Jonathan, where can people find your work currently or find you online?
I mean, you can find me on social media as everything it's Slavin_Jonathan, because Jonathan Slavin was taken by the time I signed up for anything. So I'm on Instagram and Twitter as Slavin_Jonathan. If you want to follow me, you certainly can. If you want to watch stuff, the industry sort of shut down at the moment, so nothing new is coming up, but Santa Clarita Diet is great. I completely recommend it. I'd recommend it even if I wasn't on it. Same with Better Off Ted. I think Dr. Ken is on Hulu. It's a fun family show. Nice message, lovely diversity, but also like it's a really lovely family show, something that the whole family can enjoy. Speechless, I would say the same thing. How great is it that there's a show that stars Minnie Driver and John Ross Bowie and Cedric Yarbrough and a boy with Micah Fowler, who is a boy with cerebral palsy playing a boy with cerebral palsy. So I completely recommend that as well. I get to do lots of good television. So
excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
It was great having you. No problem. Thanks to Jonathan for coming on and telling us his story. Please check back tomorrow as we have new stories all week this week as part of our Pride 2020 event. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Our title music is Red, White, Black, and Blue by Peg and the Rejected. If you have a story you'd like to tell, hit us up on Facebook, over at Twitter on My Best Story Show, or at Gmail at mybeststorypodcast@gmail.com. All those links are in the description. Until next time, go live your best story.